Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Roundtable's producer. I'm Stephen Galloway, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, Matthew Bellany.
Hello.
Emma Koskoff.
Hi.
Matt Damon. Marc Platt. Darren Aronofsky. Todd Black. And Frank Marshall. Welcome. Let's start with the first question. You're on a plane. The plane is sinking rapidly. This plane happens to have a fantastic library of DVDs. Which DVD are you going to take on that desert island when it crashes? Darren, let's start with you.
Thank you.
The first thing that popped in my head was Time Bandits. I love the fantasy of it. I can remember, when Gilliam first had God appear and chase them all down that dark, passageway. I don't know, it just stuck with me as the first thing, and I think probably lots of different layers and levels to think about and watch it.
Emma, you're not allowed to name a Martin Scorsese, but pretty much
Not a problem.
else.
It would be, if just off the top of my head, thinking to, one of those movies that I was drawn to as a child was Silkwood, Mike Nichols. I love, dramas based on real life events, and I always was captivated by the acting in that movie and just the story of that movie. So that's one that I always
Did you ever meet
return.
Mike Nichols?
I did, yeah.
What surprised you about him in person?
Just his demeanor. He's so sweet and always so sweet and lovely.
Matt.
Amazing.
I'm afraid I'm going to give the least exciting answer and the most obvious one, which is The Godfather 2. But I really...
Not one.
No. And in fact, I remember when we did The Departed together, I asked Marty, we were sitting there one day, and I said, Marty, Godfather 1 or 2? And he goes, 2. And I go, okay, why? He goes, he had more money.
Well, I was going to say Godfather 2, but I think my other one would probably be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yeah, for me, it kind of encapsulated drama and pain and comedy all at the same time, and ultimately both a tragic and an inspiring story. And I think that's really those tones are hard balances to achieve, and not very many films that I know of have achieved those as well as that did. So that one for me.
Frank.
I'd have to say Wizard of Oz.
Oh, that's a good one.
If I'm going to have to watch something over and over and over again on an island, I think that would be it. It sort of has everything for me, and it was a movie I watched a lot when I was growing up. Between the fantasy, the storytelling, I would maybe hope that I would wake up and not be on the desert island, just like she did in Kansas, so that would be my choice.
That's also a really practical answer because it is a film that we are forced as parents to watch over and over again. So it's actually been vetted. Like you can actually survive watching this movie over and over again.
Yeah.
Have you changed your mind about any film? Well, first of all, you didn't like it, and then you did.
It usually goes the other way. Revisiting films that you see when you were a teenager that had a big impact on you, and then you make movies for 20 years, and then you go back and you look and you go, man, they really slapped that thing together. That's not that good. I'd have to think if it's gone the other way, if there was a film.
Warner Brothers cartoons, those like Bugs Bunny, like you missed a whole level of humor as a kid. And you're like, they were playing for adults as well.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Is there any film you've made that you would love to make again? Not necessarily better, but great plays are staged by different actors and directors. Is there a film that you've made that you'd love to do with a different actor?
That's a dangerous question.
I'd say almost every one. It'd be so fascinating to see what each director brought to that story and how they told that story. So,
have you ever looked back at some of your early films and said, these are little things that I would have done differently?
Oh, absolutely.
What's a good example of that?
All the time. A couple I wouldn't have even made, probably. But no, I do think that you make decisions along the way that are in the moment and are influenced by a lot of things. And our job as producers is to keep the momentum going and try and get that vision up on the screen. And you scramble around in a lot of different ways to get that done.
I find it painful to look back. In post, you watch your film 100 times and then 100 more while you're selling it. If I'm watching an HBO or Showtime and one of my movies comes on, I'll watch it for 3 minutes and I'll move off of it. It's painful for me because I do see everything that didn't go right in my mind or that I want to make better. Because you learn, hopefully, as you get older, both as a a human being, and as a filmmaker, you learn what you could have made better that you were struggling to, or you thought you had right. So I actually find it painful to go back.
I have the same experience. I can't watch any of any film I've ever done.
Yeah.
For the premiere is the last time I've seen
me
any
too.
film I've ever done.
Me too.
The only movie I can watch over and over again is The Departed. It's the only one.
That's because Matt's here.
Why that
I promise you.
Why that one?
Because I love that movie. It's so complex and wild. I just, anytime it comes on, I am drawn to it. But typically, yeah, I'm the same. I've seen it so many times that I can't see them again.
But it's interesting. People don't have the experience of knowing what the movie could have been, right?
Yeah.
And that's when you're on the other side of it, that's all you live with is what it could have been.
Painful.
And it's almost hard to see what it is because you're just wrapped up in what your own expectations were while you're making
You
it.
look back at those decisions that you have to make, and you go, a lot of them you made the right one, but then you go, oh God, I should have done that.
Well, invariably it's too many decisions.
Yeah,
you know?
Right.
Yeah. Peter Bogdanovich once said to me, there are three movies when you go to make a movie. There's the movie you write, the movie you shoot, and the movie you cut. And if you knew in the next phase what not to have in the one before, you wouldn't do it. But each phase influences the next one.
That's for sure true. When you are developing a movie and shooting a movie, and then by the time you get to the cutting room, you can really change massive things. You start with something, and then you end up with something hopefully even better, but it is different oftentimes than the way you started. At least for me, it has been.
You mentioned on-the-fly decision-making. I'm curious, Darren, is there an instance in one of your films where you made a decision on the fly and it turned out to be spectacular? Something, that you decided at the last minute and it turned out to be one of the best things in the film?
Well, I think there's a million of those moments in the moment that you sort of go with, okay, what's the best solution? And then afterwards, you kind of remember the ones that went well. And the disaster ones you just try to fix and bury for a long time. Every single shot working with Mickey Rourke as a director I had no idea what was going to happen because, marks didn't exist, screen direction didn't exist, and we sort of had to just sort of be improvisational the whole time. But I've done it the other way where everything was exactly like the storyboards that we went the whole way.
Actually, Frank was involved with one of the most iconic moments in film that was made up.
I was just thinking about that. On Raiders.
On Raiders,
right?
Yeah.
Which one is that?
It's the moment when we're in the gun.
The gun, yes. Tell the gun story.
Yeah, and it solved a whole bunch of problems.
Well, tell us what it was.
Well, we were in Tunisia. We had been shooting in Tunisia in 130 degrees for 6 weeks. Everybody was tired. We had 3 days left, and we were supposed to shoot this big fight between the whip and the sword. Indiana Jones was going to fight this big swordsman through this marketplace in a Tunisian village. And we had this pile of storyboards like this, and we had 3 days to shoot it. So we started in the morning, and we shot it the whole morning. And it took the whole morning just to do like 3 storyboards.
Right.
And it was really slow, mainly because when you're doing a big action sequence in another country, translating to tell the villagers and all the extras and everything else that was going on just took forever. So I went to Steven at lunch and I said, the way it's going, we're going to be 2 days over. And Harrison was at lunch and he was with Steven. I now know the story, what happened after I left. He went and talked to Harrison and Harrison was not feeling well. And I'm not sure, it's
Nobody will say who said what.
I won't say it. But somehow somebody said, why don't I've got this gun and why don't I just use that? And Steven said, got it. And he came to me after lunch and he said, here's what I want to do. Find a guy that can handle the sword and do all these fancy things with it. And I go, well, he's just, okay. So we found it. And after lunch, we did 3 shots and we were 2 days ahead of schedule.
Oh, wow.
Left. And it's
great.
the biggest moment in the movie.
That's great.
And the key there is when you're given that challenge, solving it gets you to a better place and gets you to a better idea sometimes.
But what happens is when you have an actor that is so enmeshed in the role, like Harrison was, Matt, I would say the same thing with you. When you have a super smart actor who really embodies the character, we just did this on Magnificent Seven where Denzel had to do something at the end of the movie with Peter Sarsgaard, and we were struggling, and it was 120 degrees in Baton Rouge, and you wanted to kill yourself. And Denzel stopped. He goes, why don't I just do it this way when I kill him? And everybody was like, oh, yeah, nobody thought of that. But his character thought of that, and it made the whole day on time, and we were done, and we were out of there. But I think oftentimes it does take the director and the actor kind of being able to come up with that alone without anybody in the room sometimes, particularly when you're under the gun like that, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of crossover, though, in a lot of the jobs. Like, I mean, we've done a bunch of movies together, but we were way behind schedule on the Bourne Identity. And you know, Frank's a director also, so he grabbed a camera and started shooting Clive up on this
You're not
mountain.
supposed to be telling me.
No, but I mean, but it's that whole concept of whatever it takes. You know what I mean? Whatever it takes. Like, all right, I'm going to go. What size are you on? What lens are you on? Okay, we don't have time.
I can help you.
I can help you, right? I can do this. You know, I'm a writer also, so it's all right. Well, here, but let me, and some of it comes out of the character. Some of it just comes out of having made movies for so long. I mean, Denzel's a director and a writer and a producer in his own right. So, it's not surprising that he would come to work with ideas. Right.
It's a problem solving.
That's all it is. Yeah, I agree.
That's what we do. Yeah, we don't stand there and the clock and is ticking, and you got to move forward, and hopefully it creates something exciting.
What makes a great producer?
Well, I think probably a lot of things. I think taste is one thing, and the ability to recognize what might or might not be a good story. The most significant thing is probably then marrying that story to the right storyteller. And then I think it's about understanding the vision of what the movie is and making sure everybody on the team is making the same film, so that the world that's being created in the film is a unified vision tonally, aesthetically, emotionally. That's what I think is the sign of a good producer, along with the problem solving that we all have to do, and being the bridge between the creative side of a venture and a business side.
How did that play out on La La Land? Because that has a very unique vision, and it could have been a wildly different film. Approaching a musical in a modern way, how did that play out with what you just said about your vision?
Well, I think as producers, each time we work with a director, you have to understand what each director does and doesn't do, what his or her sensibility is, what his or her strengths and weaknesses are. In the instance of La La Land, I had a very, very strong, opinionated, lovely young filmmaker, Damon Chazelle, with a very strong point of view. So when a filmmaker can sit with me and literally communicate to me shot by shot the entire movie, I know exactly what he wants to do, and I can see it in my head, so I can help execute it. So with Damien, it was about protecting that vision, and when I saw it veer off, being able to say to him, you wanted it to be blue, and it feels like it's leaning into red, and shouldn't it be blue? The rules of his film were very specific to him, so it was about protecting that and protecting the outside world from, shouldn't the music have a little hip hop in it, and shouldn't it be this? So it was being very true to what the film is. And then it was about helping him work with, quite frankly, movie stars. He never really worked on that level before. And although an actor is an actor, there are some actors who have very strong points of view, have had a lot of experience on films, and they bring that to the table. You all know that. And so giving him the confidence to do that, being the bridge among the four of us, my two actors, and Damon when it needed to be.
City of stars, are you shining just for me? City of stars, there's so much that I can't see. Who knows? Is this the start of something wonderful and new?
Darren, on Jackie, you were originally going to direct that film. How was it to transition out of that role and into the producer role and allowing the filmmaker to have his vision while also being that kind of strong producer?
The hardest part of it was casting the director, and it took us like 6 years and many different directors.
Why didn't you direct?
I didn't direct because it's all a weird timing thing when it comes to films. It's whatever's developed to the right place at the right time, and everything's coming together. Natalie was the right point, but it wasn't time yet for me and Natalie to work together again. So I knew I wanted the right director. And, as Pablo Larraín, who directed Jackie, talks about, it was really strange when he got a phone call from me that I wanted a Chilean director to do this great American story. I was blown away by Pablo's film, The Club, and I knew his earlier work. And he was just such a brilliant, singular director. I was, watching this master form He shot that film, The Club, in 18 days and brought you into this world that never knew it existed, but you cared for all these despicable characters in a very deep way. And it comes from my point of view, but if you find a really talented filmmaker who connects with material, you kind of can let them go.
Yeah.
And knowing that they're going to do something with it. When the director is really gifted and singular and an auteur, it always works out and becomes something interesting.
Would you mind getting a message to all our funeral guests when they land?
Of course.
Inform them that I will walk with Jack tomorrow, alone if necessary. And tell General de Gaulle that if he wishes to ride in an armored car or in a tank for that matter, I won't blame him. And I'm sure the tens of millions of people watching won't either.
Emma, you've worked with Martin Scorsese. What does the producer bring to him? This is a very opinionated auteur.
Yes. Yes. He has a very exacting nature in terms of his preparation to shoot. And specifically with Silence, this film that he's lived with for, nearly 3 decades, he's been shot listing this and shooting this movie over and over in his head. So giving him the time and the sort of tranquility and safety to execute what he needed to and wanted to. And we were shooting in very, very difficult conditions. We were over in Taiwan. We were daylight every day, exterior, daylight dependent. We had, locations sometimes 2 hours from, one way. Mountains, valleys, fog, mud. It was wildly challenging every day. And I think what I was able to do was sort of keep the calm because we were under great financial pressure, schedule pressure. We didn't have the luxury of, calling back home, being like, sorry, we're 5 days behind. We need some more dough. It's not happening. So we had to he and I worked really for the first time as closely as we ever have.
It seems to me that our mission here is more urgent than ever. We must go find Father Ferreira.
This is in your hearts, then, both of you?
Yes.
Then I must trust God has put it down. The moment you set foot in that country, you step into high danger.
Problem solving left and right, keeping Marty feeling safe and, not distracted by, having to reshoot and making the day. And
Marty's always got leeway because he's Marty, you know what I mean? But you're saying so
no leeway.
There was no leeway. And so did you see a different side of him?
I saw a different Marty.
Wow. Interesting.
And I saw Marty that listened, and when I said, we got to be dropping shots, no problem. We got to do what we got to do with this weather. We'll fix it in post. We'll fix it in post.
That's my favorite line.
Yeah.
I go like this to people.
Fix it in post.
Do it now, though.
That's true.
It's really scary.
Fix it in post.
But and he was on that set. He never left the set.
Wow,
the minute he got on the set, granted, he'd have to hike up a mountain and then go into like a little tent, so he would rather
You planned
just
it that
sit
way
there.
just to make sure that he didn't leave
Matt, weren't you going to act at one point in Manchester by the Sea?
I was going to direct it. You talk about those seismic decisions that you make. I think the smartest thing I did as a producer was replacing myself. But it was really clear once I read it, really after Chris Moore and I read the first draft of that, which was a long, 150 or so page draft where Kenny was finding it, but everything that's in the movie was in that first draft. And then he took about 30 pages off of it. And it just was clearly his... It was a Kenny Lonergan movie. And I just said, look, I'll play the role and you direct it. He'd had a horrible experience on Margaret. I mean, not creatively, but with the, subsequent litigation and all that, stuff that really robbed him of years of his kind of life and creative life. Yeah. Suddenly there was this great screenplay that he'd written that I'd commissioned him to write, but it was like, wait a minute, we can solve a lot of things. If you just direct this, you're going to get your movie career back and be the director that everybody knows that you are. And we were going, and then I had The Martian starting. This is a couple years ago with Ridley, and so our pre-production kept collapsing until we were down to like 5 weeks of pre-production. And Chris and I got on the phone and just said, okay, we're kind of officially putting Kenny in a situation where he may not succeed. Like this isn't cool anymore. And so we punted and we said, all right, well, and I looked at my schedule and my dance card had filled up as an actor. And I said, well, I'm free in 2 years. And I'd been talking to Casey the whole time, and so had Kenny, because Casey and I did one of Kenny's plays in London in 2002. So we were all friends from that experience. And Casey is, I think, one of the most spectacular actors around. And he's also like a little brother to me. I grew up with him. And I said, okay, well, I will give this role up because the role was so good. I said, I will give this role up. And I'd John Krasinski and I had gone to Kenny with the idea. It was like, that we'd built the whole thing. It was on the 5-yard line. And I'm like, oh my God. I said, but I will give it up to Casey. And he's the only person. But if not, we'll do it in 2 years when my schedule clears up. Casey had been reading drafts and jumped on the idea and loved it. So then it was a question of, could we get it set up in today's marketplace with Casey, which was a whole... it was like nobody wants to make any of these movies anymore, right. and particularly this movie is very difficult in the sense that it's incredible, but it's about grief.
I don't have anything big to say.
It's okay.
I know you've been around, and I thought
just been getting Patrick settled in.
It seems like he's doing pretty good, huh? Considering.
I think he is, yeah.
I guess you don't know this, but I really kept in touch with Joe. It's been kind of weird for me not seeing Patrick. Oh, okay. I didn't know.
We got shut down everywhere until we found this woman named Kimberly Stewart. This is the first movie that she has produced. And she read it, she got it, she understood it. She sat down with Chris and I and said, this is the type of producer I'm gonna be. She made a massive bet on her taste.
Can you text me her number?
Well, everybody believed. I said to her, your phone's not going to stop ringing because...
Are you going to direct at some point?
Yes, I am. It's funny. I was going to direct this, and then Krasinski and I went and we wrote Promised Land, and then I couldn't direct that, and Gus came in and directed it, and so I keep giving away these good directing jobs, but I am definitely going to direct.
So he's going to do the next Bourne, I guess.
Bourne will be, the septuagenarian, Bourne with the walker.
Do you have another one in the works?
No, not right now. Not right now. Those things are, they're a massive undertaking. And
you've worked with an actor who turned director, Denzel, who'd also done Fences as a play. What did you bring to it as a producer?
Well, I actually, I gave him a movie that I had developed from a friend of mine's life called Antoine Fisher. It was a little tiny movie I did years ago. I went to Ed L'Amato, may he rest in peace. And
his agent.
Yeah, his agent, who I loved dearly. And Ed said, he wants to meet you, but he actually wants to tell you something when he meets you that I don't want you to be surprised about. And I'm like, because he doesn't really want to act and he wants to direct it. And I'm like, so that's the way we started our relationship with him directing. So we did that, and then we did another movie called The Great Debaters. And then Scott Rudin, who's my partner on the project and who's the producer of the movie as well, and of the play, had given Denzel the screenplay that August Wilson wrote before he did the play.
He wrote it as a screenplay first?
He did. It was the only screenplay that August Wilson wrote of all of his plays.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, I didn't know really amazing, actually. And Denzel at that time, and this was 6 or 7 years ago, said, I don't know that I'm ready to direct yet, but let me read the play. And he read the play, and he called Scott, and he said, you know what? I want to do the play. That was the time period. He always sets aside every couple of years a 16-week period to do Broadway. And he did the play with Viola, and we had cast Viola in Antoine Fisher. She was in one scene in Antoine Fisher, which she's incredible in. So we kind of knew her from there. And then when we were making Magnificent Seven in the 124-degree heat in Baton Rouge, he said to me, I think I'm now ready emotionally to take it on. And he called Scott, and we all three got on the phone and said, let's go do it. And Paramount had the rights to it 20-something years ago when Eddie Murphy was going to do it, actually.
Wow.
I remember that. Yeah. And so met with the Paramount people, and they said yes. And we finished Mag 7. And Denzel's whole thing was to make sure that as much of the play was in the screenplay, even though we were opening it up, and August had opened it up, because as he would say, August Wilson is American Shakespeare.
A man is supposed to take care of his family. You live in my house, fill your belly with my food, put your behind on my bed because you're my son. It's my duty to take care of you. I owe a responsibility to you. I ain't got to like you. Now, I don't give you everything I got to give you. I give you your life.
I've worked with Denzel for so long, way back since Philadelphia, actually, was our first film. And he's one of the great American treasures. And in terms of as an actor and as a filmmaker, a very strong point of view, very smart. And just to say to Todd, knowing Denzel as I do and knowing the trust he has in your collaboration is, I admire it greatly. We're all better for it. So it's like what Frank used to have us do.
Frank, you work with a sort of American treasure on Sully, and I'm interested in how you developed the script, because the whole marketing campaign was, this is not the story you know. How did that develop?
It's an interesting producing problem.
You mean working with Clint or developing?
Both. And actually started way back in that luncheon in Tunisia with when Harrison decided to shoot The Swordsman. Harrison was at a dinner at the White House, an aviation dinner, and there were all of these aviation sort of heroes and things at the dinner, and one of them was Sully. This was 6, 7 years ago. And they were sitting at the same table, and so I said, well, I wrote a book. What do I do with it? Harrison said, I don't know, but here, call my friend Frank. And he gave Sully my phone number. And that's how this all started.
Wow.
So I got this call, and I went to the publisher. It was in Beverly Hills, and I went and sat, and there's Sully. He trusted Harrison, and he trusted me, and he said, okay, I'm going to give you the rights. So I now had this book, and coincidentally, another thing, timing is everything. I was meeting the next week with Alan Stewart, who was a producer and was an executive at Warner Brothers, and she had started this new company that developed scripts. So they were looking for, she and her partner Kip Nelson, who's also a producer on the movie, were just looking for projects. So I said, well, I just happen to have this here. And I had this book, and I handed it to them. They loved the story, but there wasn't, we all knew the story. That was the key. We didn't know where the conflict was or why this would be a movie. So we went up and met Sully. We went to his house, and I introduced him. I said, we're going to get a writer, and we're going to do this. And we said, did anything else happen along the way? And he started telling the story, how he and Jeff Skiles, the co-pilot, they started to feel like maybe they hadn't done the right thing. It was such a long, protracted series of hearings and things. And he started, he was in New York, and he couldn't get home, and he had a family, he had 2 daughters, and he couldn't see his wife. And all of this started really, he kind of went into post-traumatic stress or something of this event when everybody was saying, you're a hero, you're a hero.
Right.
And so we thought, whoa, there's something we could develop.
Sully, don't worry, you did a great thing. It's gonna be remembered for a very long time.
Here's the funny thing. I've delivered 1 million passengers over 40 years in the air, but in the end, I'm gonna be judged on 208 seconds.
Did Harrison Ford ever think of starring?
I don't think so. I asked him, of course. That's my first question, will you play him? But no, I think Harrison wanted to just give us the gift of this story and see what we could do with it. Then what's interesting, when I look back now, we got the script. We hired Todd Carmanicki, who did a great job with the script, and we worked and developed it for almost a year. I went around to every studio and every cable, and I think what happened when I'm now evaluating this is the junior executives who read the scripts, and there's a system because you can't read everything.
Right.
So I'm forgiving.
More than I am.
We would get a little heat in the lower levels, but then I think when people heard, it's called Sully or it's The Miracle on the Hudson, they go, I know that story. And everyone in town passed. Right. Wow.
That's a very common story, by the way. I'm sure we all have those stories at this table. And if you line up most of the producers that are working either in or out of the studio system, it's a fantastic story to hear, and it's such a tribute to you. From beginning to when you got it made, how many years was that?
6.
But from when Clint said he wanted to do it, how long was it?
2 weeks.
We were together shooting the Bourne movie in Tenerife, and Frank goes, Clint read it, he wants to do it. And I go, when do you start? He goes, next month. Wow.
I said, Clint, I'm doing a movie with Matt, and we're like shooting. Can you wait till January? He said, no, I want to go in September. Okay, and when Clint says he wants to go, you go.
It's turbocharged. Yeah.
Why does silence take so long? It's 20 years this has been in the works, or longer.
Almost 30. I think for a variety of reasons. I think it was just, financial reasons, topic. It's a movie he's wanted to make so badly that he was trying to find the right time to make it. I've been with him since The Aviator, and every movie that's next was always silence. So it'd be like, we're going to do this in the silence next. And then we'll just do The Departed in the silence next. And I think, he and Jay Cox wrote the script, and they have been, they've been writing continuously over the years. And I think just a confluence of events came together, and it was just the right time this time.
But you're being humble, because the idea that movie was challenging to make before the margins shrank to the extent that they did. So the fact that you got it made in today's business is awesome. It's really great.
Remarkable.
Do you guys like producing still? Darren, you're a director too. Did you like it?
It's really, really hard bring the good material. My favorite saying is the more people who say no means you're doing something right.
I like that. No is my whole career.
The way I measure it is in the first morning of a shoot, wherever you are in the world. If I wake up at 6 a.m. and I go to the set and I'm excited, and I call my wife and my kids and I go, number 22, here we go, I'm so excited. I know I'm doing the right thing for me. And I've been lucky to take a journey where the storytellers that I get to work with are trying so many different things. So
you were an executive for many years.
Yes.
Did that help or hurt you as a producer?
For sure. I started as a lawyer for a very famous agent by the name of Sam Cohn.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was Mike Nichols' lawyer, and I was Bob Fosse's lawyer. My favorite movie would be All That Jazz, and not just because I knew Bobby, but because he was stretching cinematic grammar. And I thought, is it wow, you can break rules and do that. And Woody Allen and Meryl Streep, the people I've made movies with in my executive career. And I learned from Sam, actually, in some ways, how to produce. He was that old-fashioned agent that actually, for his clients, made mountains move to make them happy. So yes, being an executive definitely helped as well, because as a partner now, as a producer, I understand the vernacular, I understand the sensibility of a studio, and I know the money at stake. I know the questions that need to be asked. I also know when I'm being spun a little bit. And I also know how to, at this point, because I'm old, guys, I want to get to the bottom line. I have no tolerance I don't need to be spun myself. So it all helps, because I don't think there's anything I haven't seen. But the last thing I want to say is that what I love most is I get to sit and watch Steven Spielberg direct Bridge of Spies, as you spent much of your professional career do, and watch a prodigious talent, come to the set every morning with a tie and be a half an hour early and be so excited at every shot and be like, well, that's joyful. And then I get to go to Ang Lee, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, and watch him see things that none of us at this table can see. I mean, we'll see what the future bodes, but, he tried employed a new technology, 120 frame, and to watch him experiment and evolve was thrilling. And then to go to Damien Chazelle, such a singular young talent who had such a vision of this musical film. And
what was the vision initially? What were the initial conversations? Did you say, I want to do a grittier version of a musical, or what?
Damien developed this with two wonderful young producers, Fred Berger and Jordan Horowitz. They brought, thankfully, lucky me, they brought me this script. And
because of your history in musicals?
I think partially because of my history of musicals. I think because of being lucky to paint on large canvases as a producer and small canvases as well. And I don't know what other reasons there, but hopefully the chemistry was right or whatever. And the thing I'll say about La La Land, if you see the film, is that you feel a filmmaker's love of cinema in every frame, because he loves what he does. He was able to tell me, sitting at a table like this, literally, this is the first shot and this is the second shot, and not in a storyboard way, it was in his head, in a really fluid and magnificent and vivid way where you felt transported. You could feel and taste the film.
He also is an amazing editor. I remember after seeing Whiplash, I saw it early on, and I went back to my office and I was like, not only do I need to meet Damien, who was out of town, I said, I need to meet Tom Cross. This is a guy who clearly he and Damien are connected, it felt like. And I called Tom in and met with him. And the way you're speaking of Damien is the way he speaks of him too. And I think he has the sense to surround himself as such a young director with amazing people to help him. You know, I mean, I'm sure you can speak the same way when you, as a director, when you're making very unique, special films in and out of the studio system, you really handpick and rely on your team to make you who you are, right?
Yeah. It's important to have a family.
As a producer, did you have trouble staying away from the editing for Jackie?
You know, once again, Pablo is really a master. So it was very much a pleasure and honor to be watching his process. So I think what we did, Pablo is definitely more experimental, and it's weird to call myself a little bit more traditional Hollywood.
You're the establishment now, Darren.
I'd say, if we want to make it we were pushing for more commercial ability with it a little bit, and he was open to that. He wanted to, reach out, and, he kept kind of making snide jokes about it. I was like, it's me. I'm not really the most commercial guy in the world. But he was very open to it. I think my filmmaking is really narrative-based, and he's definitely more experimental, more European. And so it was fun dancing with that. So when we saw the cuts, we were always like, well, it completely works as it is, but if you do want to include, a little bit more of the audience, you could sort of look for it this way. And I think the end product works really well because it's very much an art film, but it's also incredibly emotional for audiences. So I think his integrity is completely there, but, he was able to make this iconic historical figure with Natalie's unbelievable performance into a really emotional experience that I think many people will relate to.
What did you most like and what did you most dislike about producing?
I very much like putting together the package. Putting together a movie is really exciting. It's a lot of fun when you really feel the pieces come together. Right. It's like that jigsaw puzzle feeling when you find that piece and it sort of starts to make sense. And as I said, Jackie was really tricky to find all the right pieces to make that film come alive. When you do make these small films, I mean, it's basically, we didn't get paid to do it. The first contribution of fees was the producers for some reason on our end. I was like, Pablo's got to live, and, we just believe in this film and this is the right way to make it. So yes, if the film, becomes Black Swan, maybe I'll make some money. But otherwise, it's really... So that's really hard because you spend all this time in these films that are hard to make. It's very hard to figure out a way to sort of support yourself.
People say this is a golden age for television. What kind of an era do you guys think we are in for film?
It's a challenging time because one has to continue to find ways to make a world that is increasingly living in a device or watching and experiencing and consuming entertainment and culture and news, sadly, and everything in the world on a device that's this big. So I think part of the job, part of the challenge is how do you keep people coming into the theaters? What kind of experience can you give them where they have to have that collective joyful experience of being in a theater with a bunch of people? So I think it's challenging in that regard, and it's challenging because of the way the world is reduced to 140 characters, the way we're red state or blue state, the way we market films. We market films by how we can reduce it down, which means we have to have a brand, which means we have to make whatever movie number 17 because it's a brand. So that is more challenging to make those movies, but also make the kind of movies that are just about passion and emotion, and so they're more challenging. But that said, look at all these wonderful movies that all these folks are representing here today, and so you have to say, my goodness, we're in a wonderful time of filmmaking. If there's Manchester by the Sea, and there's Fences, and there's Sully. All these films, Jackie, are, I think it's a wonderful time.
I agree with Marc completely. I mean, for me, I have a series of movies that are, my babies. I'm doing, Equalizer 2 next year. That's a big blah, blah, blah movie that's great and pays the bills and make Sony happy. And then I'm doing a little movie that Chris Terrio wrote called The Ends of the Earth.
Oh, you're doing that?
Wow.
Oh, that's a great script.
And that's a little tiny, incredibly gorgeous, beautiful story, true story. I think as a producer, at least, and we're a little older, so we can do this a little easier, to feel better about making big commercial movies, I have to, and you have to, clearly, and you do too, I think, feel like you also have to be able to get your gems made. I actually think it's a very exciting time. It is tough. It's always been tough. Whenever I hear people say it's so tough, it's always been tough. But I don't know, I think you can easily get hung up with the tough, and you have to get over that.
Well, and I think we've all adapted every decade to whatever reflects what we adapt. And this is a new time. And on the flip side, there's a lot of opportunity now for some of those projects that you couldn't get on the big screen to get made.
Right.
But Matt, on Manchester, did you flinch a little knowing that Amazon was going to buy it and knowing that most people would see it not on the big screen?
Not at all. No, I think Behind the Candelabra kind of disabused me of that. You know, when we couldn't get that set up, it was Steven, Michael, and me, and we couldn't get $23 million to make that movie anywhere.
That's crazy.
And HBO made it, and so many more people saw the film because we went to HBO, and it did get an international release, so people could see it on a big screen and overseas. And I felt like we made the exact movie that we wanted to make. And so, no, Amazon was a huge thing for us. Also, they're looking to really brand themselves with these prestige projects, so they're really going to get behind the movie and turbocharge it in a way I think a traditional marketing campaign couldn't, just because, you know, our budget's $8 million. So, I mean, how much were you really going to dump into P&A on a movie like that? You know, it's probably going to open limited and enough people won't see it. And I think people's viewing habits are changing too. People are starting to catch on to the fact that you can go to an Amazon and you can see some of the best films of the year there. And you know, and I think people are kind of catching on to that.
Yeah.
What's been your best day and your worst day as a producer?
As a producer?
Yeah. I'm sure as an actor you can...
I've produced less than anybody here, I think, so
it should be easy to remember.
I remember some pretty bad days on movie sets.
I can tell you my best day was the final wrap on Silence. It was my best and most proud day.
And the worst day was all the other days?
Correct.
What was the worst?
I lost 20 pounds. I was brought to my knees daily.
Well, you had like typhoons and stuff, didn't you?
I had typhoons. I had starving actors.
What was actually the worst day? On that or any other film?
That film. Oh my God, there were so many.
I feel like
there were
the best
so many.
and the worst day is the last day, because you've been with a couple of hundred people in the trenches 24/7 with the same vision, and you're a family. Yeah. You're really a family. And you always say, hey, we'll have dinner. And, you know, for 10 years, you never see that person.
Yes.
I think that's exactly right. The end of La La Land, the last day, it was completely joyful from beginning to end. This young filmmaker, Damon, the sun is setting, and we've really done the shooting. We're done. The sun is literally going behind the horizon, and he has a camera in his hand. He said, well, we can get another shot and another shot. And what I realized was he couldn't put the camera down. He was too sad, genuinely. And it got pitch black. We were in Pasadena. And the whole crew was around, these lovely crew, these lovely actors. And I walked up to him and I said, you have to put the camera down.
Yeah.
There's no we had no lights because it was all day shoot. And I gently took the camera from him, and he had the saddest look on his face. I'll never forget that.
On Pi, they took away my camera. It had to be returned to the camera shop. The producer literally came and was like, that's it, pulled the plugs. And we had been shooting for like 18 hours straight, me and my DP. We just wouldn't stop. So that passion is great.
It's interesting.
My favorite last day, I did a movie called The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. And I remember the last day, he and his son are walking down the streets of San Francisco. And Chris Gardner, the real-life guy whose life Will was portraying, was there that day. And we said, we should have Chris just walk through frame as they're crossing the street. It was the last shot of the movie, and they're walking down the street, and we're high up, and the cable cars are going by, and we said to Chris, just walk through frame, cross Will and his son. And Chris said to us, I actually used to cross the street here all the time once I got the job. And he did the take once, And he did the take twice, and everybody started crying. And it was just one of those moments, you know, it was one of those moments. And we kept it in the movie.
I would say for me, definitely the best day was when we went to Sundance and screened the movie, and I was sitting there with my wife and Matt Rosengarten, who's Kenny's, he's Kenny's lawyer. And the last time I'd seen Matt was he was deposing me. So I'm sitting there, and I'm really excited for Kenny, and I'm really excited for Casey and Michelle Williams and Lucas Hedges, and I'm sitting there, and I'm suddenly aware of this figure looming over me, and I look up, and it's Matt, and he goes, "It is really good to see you here." And I said, "It's really good to see you here." And then we screened the movie, and it was a huge triumph, and we sold it that night to Amazon. It's a huge sale, and it was just a really wonderful kind of, completing a circle and kind of getting, everything was right with the Force again.
That's the first thing, was that first screening is such an amazing feeling. It's different, being a director, you're so, every single second you're in the trenches. And on this one, I was definitely more of the macro producer sitting back. And so to see it finally all come together with an audience and to watch it with them, I was choking up and crying a lot through the movie. And I couldn't actually tell if it was because it was the emotion of the movie or I was proud of Natalie and Pablo and the whole team coming together. But I would find myself more emotional than I ever have been watching my own films because I know those emotions. I'm usually just curious about the audience. I was able to kind of get swept up in the experience.
I think that's true. As a producer, when you're watching the cut with your director next to you, this happened with Denzel actually on Fences early on. I went to the cutting room and I'm like, come on, show it to me. And he's like, okay. And we sat down, we went to the screening room and he and I and our editor Hughes sat down and we watched it. And it was, Denzel and Hughes had been the only two people that had seen the movie at that point. And you're right, the lights came up and I was hysterically crying. And I was so nervous and rooting for Denzel so badly and hoping he felt the same way.
About it, right.
And he had to leave the screening room. He was so emotional from it. And that was so satisfying. As a producer, when you helped your director to achieve their goal, and you as the producer feel so proud of that film, that's one of the best days, I think.
When we ran Sully, we premiered in New York.
Gosh.
It was the most unbelievable screening
bet.
I have ever been at. I mean, they were applauding things like, why are they applauding? The plane landed. We know it landed, but, and they were because they were a character in the movie and everybody, it was a good event. It was good news. Right. And so those screenings are really special.
Yeah. Frank, what's something that you love about film now that maybe you didn't at the start of your career?
That's a good question.
I love it all. I mean, it's
How has it changed, though?
Well, it's changed. I'll tell you one thing that I really like about the technology change. We all remember the days when we would see our movies in Kansas City or in Dallas, and we go, oh, that's, barely light. You can't hear the sound. People are going, what? They're getting it. We're now able to show our movies exactly the way they leave our director's hands. Right. You're not worried about scratches or dirt or light or sound.
I remember when you didn't have the Avid. Sure. And, if you wanted to make a change, you had to leave for the full day and come back. Right. And see it. I mean, I'm really dating myself, but you really are.
I've been thinking a lot about it as a director. It's a different craft. It's really, these tools are making a different art form. It's as significant as changing what a painter, what the brush is.
Yes, definitely.
It's interesting because, someone asked me if I'm still framing my pictures. Because because now, with these 4 to 6K cameras, you can basically go wide and you don't have to commit to the box. And for me, that's like the basic part of my art is framing. And I'm like, wow. But there are times, everyone makes mistakes where you go, well, the frame, I wish I had a little more room there, or the camera bumped and I wish I could stabilize it, but I can't.
Right.
And I shot this last film that I just directed on 16. It's becoming so difficult to shoot in film. And then we had to do one effect shot with the red, which I had never shot on. And I just was like, oh my God, what the hell? I mean, it's like cheating. It's like showing up with a calculator at the SAT. And it's becoming a different craft. It's really becoming about just capturing, the room and the space as much as you can, and then the possibilities in post are becoming. I always talk about I don't know if you remember the King of Comedy shot where Marty had an extra in the background waving at the camera in one scene. Today, no problem.
Right.
And The Wrestler, we shot at live events, and we had tons of people staring at the camera. And if you watch the film, you'll see lots of people like with their eyes shut for the whole scene because they were looking into the lens, and we could fix it. It was not a problem. So in some ways, there's incredible benefits of what you could do in post. You don't have to worry that the C-stand is peeking in anymore. But it's a different art form.
Matt, what's something that you appreciate now that you maybe didn't? You had a lot of success young. That's a young actor.
I appreciate that we don't need the boiling, hot lights anymore. That we, the low light you can shoot in. I mean, I remember shooting Contagion with Soderbergh, and there were scenes where I couldn't see Gwyneth Paltrow across the room. But the technology really has. Look, there wasn't. I mean, when we went to do that little movie Promised Land that John and I wrote, Gus directed it, and Gus called and goes, "Do you mind if we don't do Video Village on this one?" And I go, "Yeah, no, I don't care." And then we started laughing. We go, we used to make movies like that all the time. There wasn't Video Village in the last 2 decades. That kind of came along, and now it's just, there's a whole community, a whole village that builds up around there, kind of sitting there and kind of watching the movie unfold. You know what I mean? Whereas we're up on our feet, kind of around the camera.
Yeah, I find that not helpful.
Well, Soderbergh refers to that area, those people, as energy vampires.
You know what I do now? I actually find you have to really limit. I now literally will limit Video Village. It's the producers, and if makeup or wardrobe have to be there,
of course,
but nobody else. And I think you have to put a tent around it because it is distracting.
We have Marty's tent and the little monitor for makeup and hair, and that is it. Nobody else is allowed to see the monitor.
I want to ask you one last question. In your own lives, I want you to name one experience that you would like to put into a film. Matt?
Nothing leaps to mind. I did get one of those demos of that Oculus Rift where, and it was explained to me. I watched this concert. Beck did a concert, and so I watched the concert. And I had seen it in 2D on my laptop, and then I had the 3D or the immersive experience. And apparently, it goes to a different part of your brain. You remember it as if you experienced it rather than if you saw it in your kitchen on a laptop. But it was explained to me that we might reach a point where future generations, will have these kind of non-invasive cameras, and much like we relive moments like on home video, you'll be able to not only see your child's first steps walking, you'll be able to go back to that moment and turn around and look at your wife crying in the doorway and experience the same moment from a different perspective.
That's going to happen? We're going to be able to do
Apparently,
that?
I don't know if
While your kid is in front of you doing the same thing with a monitor, so you're not even hanging out with each other. That's the thing they don't tell you.
Right, exactly. So I mean, so I think of things like that, like really kind of seismic moments in my life that maybe I wouldn't mind going back and looking around the room and seeing. But there's nothing that I can think of that I'd want to make a movie out of my own life at this point.
I like to think there's little pieces of me, as I'm sure there are all of you, in every film because we draw upon what we know when we're contributing creatively and you're trying to get to the truth of something so you understand how you felt or you behave, et cetera. But
when you
pieces,
see the samurai in Silence, that's me.
Oh, there you go. But
Darren, how about
I'm
you?
Natalie Portman in Black Swan, so I'm done.
There you go. I think my own life is like the reason that's my life is I'm not sure I want it, the real, quiet, joyful moments of my life on screen. So I know there's pieces, but everything else is just my life. I like to keep it that way.
I mean, that's the thing that makes good film is, the fact that we can watch a 6-year-old girl in Iran or Sully on an airplane. When it's great filmmaking, you are drawn into a person and an experience that you never thought you could relate to. That's the great thing of our art is, I always talk about the greatest invention of the 20th century that's not spoken about is the close-up. And the fact that you can get right up to Paul Newman and get into his head, or not in his head, but really empathize with him and go on his journey is, the great thing of our art. So for, I think all of us as storytellers, we're just constantly trying to find true emotions. And how we know if those emotions are real is when we're on the set, we watch them and we go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's real. So I think it's all there.
It's a tough question. I agree with Marc. There's so many really wonderful moments I've had in my life and incredibly grateful for every day that I don't necessarily know that I would want to share them or that even people could relate to them. But I will say the the greatest thing about being a film producer for me is you do get to put a little bit of something you either believe in or that's happened to you or an emotion that's happened to you. You do get to lace it in a little bit when you're working with your writer or your director into a scene here or a character there. And that, I do that in pretty much every movie I've made. So it's hard to say one moment.
Yeah, I have to agree with Todd that I think everything that we've all done in our whole life is an experience that we can put into our movies somewhere. There's a moment, I did it this way, or, in Bourne, we're always saying, well, what would he do here? What would he do? Well, I remember when this happened in my life, and I'm able to put that moment in.
You remember when you kicked 5 guys' asses in a row?
I got this one, guys. I can totally relate this to an experience that I had recently.
It's usually that. No, it's. I do think you see a little bit of yourself in all your movies.
Well, Coppola, you said when I did The Rainmaker with him 20 years ago, he would call me Rudy. That was my character name. Rudy, and he would start to tell me a very personal story, and he would wind it up, and it was something that happened in his life, and he'd say, and that's why I wrote this scene. And then he would just leave me with that. He wouldn't ask but that's how he connected to it, and then it was my job to figure out how I could connect to it. But it was all based on personal.
Even when you're doing like the Bourne movies or big action things, do you consciously try to bring something?
Yeah. You have to, yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's just a lot easier the older you get, because we have. The breadth of experience and, the sadness and the joy and, you really, it's so much easier to just go like that and put your finger in it and have it be real.
Right. It is the beauty of age.
It really is. It really is.
It helps a lot being older being in the movie business, I think. For me, at least, it does.
Yeah.
You're looking at me.
Don't you agree, though?
I think that you have a deeper appreciation for all that goes into producing and making a film. I think when I was younger, both as a studio executive and as a younger producer, did my first film like Legally Blonde, there's certain things that and the more experience you have and the more people you're around, the more filmmakers you work with, the more stories you tell, you just have a deeper appreciation for how complicated and complex and the problem solving is.
And you learn what to let go of.
You learn what to go of, what really matters at the end of the day.
Do you still all remember the very first or the very worst job you had before you became successful?
In the business?
Anything.
Dishwasher.
Where?
Aspen. My hands were frozen every night.
Oh, it must have been.
I went home.
I had to hand out flyers on the street to get people to come in and buy women's dance shoes half off. As a 17-year-old, it was really, and because it was all my friends walking by, it was horrible.
Really great.
Darren, what about you?
I think I was a storyteller back then, so I was always looking for the stories, even doing the crappy jobs.
Like what?
I drove a car service in South Brooklyn when I grew up, did the midnight shift, but it was great driving guys to pick up their heroin. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. It was all interesting.
I parked cars when I was 13 years old at a church parking lot near my house because I loved cars. And I told them I was 16. They never asked for my driver's license. And I was the valet park for funerals and weddings on Sundays. And I got paid $5 an hour, which as a kid, that's a lot of money. And then I flipped burgers at a place in the valley called Orange Julius, which I don't think is there anymore. And I became the manager at 16, and I hired all my friends. So that was really fun.
I was a hostess in a restaurant for 2 days, and then I became a PA. And never looked back.
PA was the worst job.
PA was heaven.
I was.
Compared to the hostessing
I'd
job.
thank all of you for taking part in the Hollywood Reporter Roundtable's producer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
What's going on? I'm Alicia Keys.
I'm Taraji P. Henson.
John Favreau.
Jeff Bridges here.
Matt Damon.
Naomi Harris.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks for watching.
For more videos, be sure to subscribe.
I guess subscribe online for more videos if you want more of that stuff.
I don't work for The Hollywood Reporter. They paid me to say that, though.